There are lots of reasons to go with plant-based meat. More than I realized, apparently. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to that in the description below, and it'll give you a pretty good overview of what the Horror Movie Syllabus is all about. In short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore, but that's not what we're doing today, because this is our Is It Syllabus-Worthy series. This is where I take a recommendation from you guys, a horror movie that I've never seen before. I check it out without knowing anything about it, and then I let you guys know, is it syllabus-worthy? Is it notorious enough, good enough, interesting enough to make it onto the horror movie syllabus? And today the movie we're looking at is Parents. Parents was recommended by Bunny Dracula, and they recommended it in our food video. So obviously right off the bat, I'm thinking it has something to do with food, but Bunny Dracula was pretty good about giving a high-level summary without spoiling things too much about what the movie was about. And they mentioned that it was a movie about parents that may be cannibals, and also had the ominous tagline, vegetarians beware. And as some of you know, I am a vegetarian, so I was bewaring as I dug into this movie. The interesting thing about the high-level summary provided by Bunny Dracula is that while they gave the central conceit of the movie, that actually kind of helps the experience maybe. And we're going to get into this as I talk about the movie a little bit, but it might have actually helped knowing that a little bit. I was definitely intrigued. Vegetarians Beware gave me a pretty good idea of what I was in for, and yet it also didn't. This movie was not exactly what I was expecting, and I did know a little bit about it. I had heard about it, so I kind of knew a little bit reputationally about what it was, and yet I still wasn't quite prepared for what I got. But does that mean I liked it? Does that mean I hated it? Well, let's find out. Like I said, the movie that we're talking about today is Parents. Parents came out in 1989 and was directed by Bob Balaban, who I recognize more as an actor rather than a director. And I guess he's done a lot of directing of television, and I believe Parents was his first feature film. And an interesting one to do because it is not by any stretch of the imagination your standard fare, your standard directorial effort. It's pretty ambitious, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was totally successful. But we'll get into that in just a minute. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about a young boy in the 1950s who lives in a suburban household with his mother and father, and their relationship is kind of strained and strange, and the parents love their meat, and they want the boy to eat, and they just act kind of off and bizarre, but we're seeing everything from the boy's perspective, and he's starting to think something very dark and wrong is going on with his parents, but is it something really going wrong? Or is it in his head? Is it his skewed perspective? Is there something actually wrong with him? That is the question, and that is what we're left to try to discover as hijinks start to abound, and the movie kind of goes very, very strange, very, very quickly. I'll stop there so as to not spoil it for anybody, but the fact that this movie is so strange is probably its biggest selling point. And a lot of that's derived from how the movie's made, how it looks, the style of it. The aesthetic and the style of this movie is extremely noteworthy. This 1950s kind of hyper-real looking, dreamlike kind of atmosphere and setting is highly effective. It really puts the movie into this bizarre, otherworldly perspective that enhances the idea that we're seeing everything from this kid's point of view. So it's a little bit idealized, it's a little bit dramatized, and like I said, dreamlike and a surreal. Surreal is a word that I would use for this movie quite a bit. It really kind of has this surreal quality. And again, I'll credit Bob Balaban for this. It's not the kind of movie that you would expect somebody to make for their first feature film. You'd think it'd be something a little bit more standard, a little bit more rote, a little bit more obvious. He, for the most part, eschews the obvious and goes for something a little bit quirky, offbeat, interesting. And I think it's really effective here. I think that the garish colors and the hyper real products and furniture and look and decor and set design of the movie really enhance this feeling of just kind of a little bit of general unease. Like things feel off a little bit, and I think part of that's just because we don't live in that era anymore, but also because we know from our perspective that this is a hyper real, stylized, idealized version of the 1950s. It doesn't really reflect the actual aesthetic, but rather like a movie aesthetic for it. And again, I think this is done intentionally to evoke this kind of off-putting feeling and really put us into the mind of this child. The camera works really great here, enhancing that dreamlike quality and giving you these really like close-ups and slow shots and just hyper real shots that just again really kind of hammering home the dreamlike quality of this and giving it this dare I say Lynchian quality to it. And I'm not even, that's not an original thought. Like read some of the critiques after I was watching the movie, and Lynchian came up more than once. Like the comparisons to David Lynch came up more than once, and I can see it, especially because Angelo Badalamenti, frequent Lynch collaborator and musical god, R.I.P., is doing the music for this, and it's wild because the music is often incongruous with what we're seeing, and it adds this creepy and eerie feeling. It really enhances the movie's overall mood and tone because sometimes you're watching stuff that, in and of itself, not that strange, not that creepy, but with the music underlying it, it really hits. You've got these close-ups of meat that are really gross, and with the music underlying it, it adds to this dread. You're just like, man, don't eat that, don't eat that. I mean, I wouldn't want to eat it anyways because I don't eat meat, but it really did give the dishes a foreboding and creepy feeling. And so, I mean, Angelo Badalamenti is the real hero in this movie. He really nails the musical score. Now, and the credit Balaban for A, picking him, and B, weaving that together with his imagery to create something that is, in my opinion, doesn't quite reach the levels of Lynch, but I see the comparison, and I don't think it's an unfair comparison to make. It really does nail this pretty well, pretty good. The other thing that I've got to give credit to Bob Balaban for is some of the excellent performances we're getting here. The casting is excellent. They've nailed it, and the people in the movie are really bringing their A game. And we got to start by talking about Randy Quaid, because I hate Randy Quaid. I am, whatever the opposite of a fan is what I am of Randy Quaid. I do not like him in the Vacation movies. I did not like him in Independence Day. I don't like that gross buffoon thing that he does. Now, apparently, he has a career of doing more serious work and stuff like that, and I just happen to not have seen most of that. So I can only judge him on what I've seen, and I don't like him. I just don't. But he's great here. He's not good. He's great here. He really crushes this role because this movie is doing this kind of over the top, kind of almost campy-ish acting, and it works. And it's not really full on camp. They're not playing it super big, but they're playing it kind of, again, hyper real, exaggerated, and it works. And Randy Quaid is doing a great job of this, of being like the 1950s kind of uptight dad who is also like kind of fake and but also really foreboding and really intimidating. Like Randy Quaid's kind of scary in this movie, and just doing an excellent job. And I gotta tip my hat to the guy because I didn't realize he had this kind of performance in him, and I kind of have to recontextualize everything I think about Randy Quaid after seeing this movie. Mary Beth Hurt, playing his wife, is doing this wonderful performance where she's like the 1950s housewife, all kind of uptight and demure. And there's this underlying tone of like abused wife, like battered wife thing that's not really something that the movie goes into, but you get this sense from dialogue and from some of her body language and stuff like that, that she is under, under the control of her husband. She is not necessarily totally free and of her own free will. And it's an interesting, understated, subtle performance that is underlying a rather big and, like I said, kind of campy and exaggerated performance. It's really nice work here and just really layered. And they added a subtext underneath the garish, like almost satirical view of the 1950s, which we're gonna get into that in a little bit. But then I'll mention Brian Madorsky, who is the kid who we're seeing everything from, and he's doing a solid job. He's not amazing, but he's by no means bad. He's doing a totally solid job, and it's important because we're seeing everything through his perspective. So we have to kind of relate to him. We have to kind of like him, and he brings that. He brings that. He brings the energy that he's playing off of his co-stars really well. So I'll tip my hat to him too, because he's done just enough good work to make sure that the movie works, and that's important. And that kid perspective, the seeing the movie through the kid's eyes, is important because it's really what made the movie work for me for most of its runtime. The mystery of what is going on with his parents, and the story of, whether or not his parents are frankly cannibals, is an interesting and fun angle. I don't think they necessarily stuck the landing on this one, and that's where things kind of become a problem for me. I like the initial setup. Are the parents villains, or is this all in the kid's head? Is he an unreliable narrator, and are we seeing things from his perspective, and his perspective is skewed? Because early on, there's a lot of evidence for that maybe he's misunderstanding things. He's seeing his parents do something like, have sex, and he's misinterpreting it because he doesn't understand what it is. And that was interesting. I really liked that angle in the movie, and I really wanted to see them play with that a little bit. And then kind of going a little bit farther, where maybe it's not even the parents, but maybe it's the kid who is the one who has problems and maybe has some mental health issues or something like that. Really cool idea. I kind of wish they'd gone a little farther with this. And I don't want to spoil it too much, but it really didn't quite end the way I wanted it to end. It was a dark movie, and it has a dark ending, and it's a fun movie, but I wanted to see a little bit more of this mystery, and this kind of unreliable narrator aspect to it that, for me at least, would have worked. But we're seeing the movie that they made and not the movie that I want them to make. And so the kid perspective has a lot to do with the aesthetic of the movie, and for kind of setting up the mystery of things a lot, but it doesn't really go where I thought it was going to go. And not for nothing, they make this movie out to be, and by they I mean like critics and fans, they make it out to be something of a satire of the 1950s, and maybe kind of a black comedy. I don't see that. I don't find it very funny. I find it to be very dark, but I like that. I like the darkness of it. I can't help but feel like they set something up that, to me, was a far more interesting direction to go than the direction they wound up taking it in. And is that fair? I don't really know, but it is how I felt about it, and it kind of undercut a lot of what I was feeling about the movie early on. And so that really kind of threw a little bit of a wrench in how I felt about the movie, but was it enough of a wrench to keep it from being on the syllabus? Well, let's find out. So, is Parents syllabus worthy? Probably not. At least for me, the movie didn't totally win me over, and it was looking pretty good early on. Like, the movie surprised me. I saw Randy Quaid's name, and I was just like, uh oh. But he was really good. Everybody was really good. I really loved the aesthetic of the movie. I really loved the way it looked. The direction was on point. The music was fantastic. And when I saw Angelo Badalamenti, I kind of expected that, but he lived up to my expectations. Everything was working gangbusters, but at the end, it didn't totally win me over. I didn't dislike it. The movie did not, by any stretch of the imagination, fall apart for me. It just didn't go where I was kind of wanting it to go. And it begs the question, is that fair? Is it fair for me to blame it or penalize it for what it's not when it's still so well made? And maybe it's not, but it's my syllabus. So like if I was going to pick it for the syllabus, it's got to speak to me, really, So your syllabus may vary, but for me, it didn't hit. And I know, again, I was just saying this, how a lot of people view this as a kind of a black comedy and kind of a satire. And I can see the satire of the 50s a little bit with the hyper-real aspects to it, and how it really does kind of have this idealized version of the 1950s with an underlying tone of dread and grossness and evil and whatnot. Again, Lynchian. It really kind of speaks to that Lynchian vibe, the Blue Velvet vibe. And I am not the first person to make that comparison, but it didn't really strike me as a black comedy. And again, I didn't really find this to be funny at all. I mean, there's a couple of little amusing moments, but for the most part, I didn't take it to be funny. I took it to be rather dark, but I thought that was good. I thought that it being dark and kind of serious and really, kind of messed up was a good thing. So that wasn't a problem for me. It wasn't a problem that it didn't feel like a black comedy. I just thought it was odd that other people thought it was funny. I didn't, but we also know that comedy for me is very subjective. Sometimes I just don't find things funny. So maybe it's me. I don't know. But I admit, the fact that I don't want to put it on the syllabus for myself may be specific to me because I wanted to see something happen in this movie and it didn't happen, and I'm kind of like unable to get past that apparently. But it doesn't mean that other people feel the same way. And in fact, the fact that it's got this cult following, despite the fact that it was not a commercial hit, it was not, it was a bomb, but it's developed this cult following over the years, evidenced by the fact that I knew what this movie was. I'd heard of it, had never seen it, but when Bunny Dracula recommended it, I knew what it was. And so it's got enough of a reputation there that maybe it deserves to be on the syllabus anyways. And I have put movies on the syllabus that I don't particularly like because I feel like they're important enough or noteworthy enough to be on there. And this movie is a movie I do like. I did like the movie overall. I just, like I said, I was expecting something different, and I'm having a hard time shaking it, at least in this short period of time since I've watched it to making this video. That's where I'm at. But I could see an argument being made for it being syllabus worthy in the aggregate because enough people find it noteworthy enough in a cult way to make it appropriate to put it on there. And the question is where. And I'd say for a cannibal movie, that's maybe some stiff competition, and I don't know. And also depending on how you feel about the way the movie goes, whether or not it even qualifies for that, probably maybe a tough sell for me. But maybe Dysfunctional Family. I do think this would make a pretty strong candidate for the dysfunctional family subgenre, if not for an actual syllabus worthiness, at least for an extra credit. You could talk me into that. So in that sense, maybe it squeaks onto the syllabus just because of reputation alone, but not not in the category you maybe think it would go. Maybe it goes in a different category. And dysfunctional family, after watching it, that's kind of where my gut would go for that one. So kind of a wishy-washy answer, admittedly, but yeah, that's where I stand. I don't think I'd put it on my horror movie syllabus, but I could see a lot of y'all putting it on yours, and I don't think I would argue with anybody who found a spot for it on their syllabus because it is a good movie worthy of a watch. So those are my thoughts on Parents. Thank you to Bunny Dracula for the recommendation because it was a good movie. I was surprised by how well made it was. Tip my hat again to Bob Balaban, how much I like the performances, and I figure it's a movie I would rewatch. I would rewatch this movie, and I figure on a rewatch I may be able to appreciate it more for what it is rather than for what I wanted it to be, and it might go up in my esteem. But even then, like, my esteem for it is pretty solid right now. I think this was a good movie, and if you haven't seen it, definitely worth the time to check out because even with what I've told you about it and spoiled it a little bit for you, it's not exactly what you think it is, and it's an experience. It's a ride, so check it out if you haven't. But now it's time to check out a horror trivia pursuit card. As you know, I like to look at a card and try to answer the question live on camera, and I'm going to hopefully answer it correctly. And because we're talking about parents and the way that the unreliable narrator and the kid, like, kind of trying to figure out whether there's something wrong with his parents or if there's something wrong with him. We're going to call that psychological horror. So we're going to look at the psychological horror category on the card. And today's question is, in a voice cameo role, what actor played the fiance of protagonist Michelle in 2016's 10 Cloverfield Lane? And I actually know this one, and it's kind of hilarious that I do because I recently watched a reaction video. I didn't rewatch the movie, but I watched a reaction video on the movie by a group called Cinebinge on YouTube. They're really fun. And they watched this movie and they were reacting to it. And I don't remember if they were talking about trivia afterwards or if they were talking about it during the actual movie and somebody recognized the voice, but they mentioned who this was in their video. And I just watched this, like, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, something like that, very recently. And so I didn't know who this was. I didn't know this little bit of trivia, and I didn't recognize this voice when I've seen the movie. And I've seen the movie more than once, and I've never picked up on this voice. So had I not seen that video, I would not know the answer to this question, but I do know the answer to this question. It's kind of funny, and it's kind of interesting. It's interesting to me because it is a famous person. Obviously, they wouldn't ask this question if it was just some unknown voice actor or something like that. It is a famous person. And if you haven't seen 10 Cloverfield Lane, by the way, we have talked about it on the channel. Love 10 Cloverfield Lane. It's my favorite of that franchise by far. Mary Elizabeth Winstead doing solid work. And even though I don't love I don't subscribe to the love on Mary Elizabeth Winstead, like people are really devoted to her, I do admit she's very good. And John Goodman is just amazing in that movie. Neither of them are the answer, by the way. And Mary Elizabeth Winstead playing Michelle, I wouldn't have known her name had the card not given it to me, but that's not the point. The point is they want to know the name of the actor who plays the fiance over the phone when she talks to him. And I do know that. I'm kind of prattled a little bit, giving you some time here. And either you know this because you know a fun fact, or maybe you recognized it when you watched the movie like Cinebinge did, or you're just going to be taking a guess. And if you're taking a guess, I've given you the one hint I can give you, which is famous actor. That's really all I'm going to give you because I don't want to spoil anything. But I'm pretty sure, I'm like 99% sure that I know this thanks to the reaction video I watched. So lock in your answers. Time for me to make my answer. My answer is Bradley Cooper. Bradley Cooper plays the fiance, and let's check the card. Bradley Cooper, yes. And again, thanks to Simone and George on Cinebinge, because I would not have gotten that one correct, but for watching them do their reaction video recently. Yeah, fun little cameo, I guess. Bradley Cooper, I have no idea the story behind it. Maybe one of you does know, and you can drop it in the comments for us. But yeah, I have no idea what Bradley Cooper, and it's not the first time he's done voice work, or not the last time at least, because we all know him from Guardians of the Galaxy. But yeah, fun little trivia question. I got it right. Felt pretty good about myself, but it kind of dumb luck that I got it right, frankly. Did you get it right? And if not, who did you guess? And was it funny? Because I love to hear that stuff. So that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you guys for hanging out through the trivia question. I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate you, Bunny Dracula, for your recommendation. And for all of you, keep leaving them. I'm enjoying them. We're having a good time. The success rate on the recommendations is super high. So keep those coming. And until next week, when we talk about something completely different, class dismissed.